Welcome. I'm Ed Podswole, President Tripp Scott, and we're here for another session, a webcast, and today we're pleased to have the Speaker of the Florida House, Will Weatherford. Will, welcome.
Thanks, Ed.
Hey, you called this past session the most productive legislative session ever. Give us a reason why.
Well, I think part of it was we set out goals. We said we're going to achieve certain things, and we did.
Right.
We said we were going to put more money towards education, and we did. We put $1 billion into our schools.
Big deal.
We said we were going to cut taxes, and we did. We cut a manufacturer's tax that's going to bring more manufacturing to our state. We said we were going to invest in our infrastructure. We put almost $8 billion into our infrastructure, a lot of it into our ports and seaports and airports. We said that we were going to create a Workplan Florida. Senate President Don Gates and I, who work very well together. And a lot of times in the legislature, when there are big problems, it's because the Senate President and the Speaker don't get along.
Right.
But we work together on an agenda. And of the 5 issues we said we wanted to accomplish, we hit 4 of them out of the park. And so to me, overall, the session was very productive. I give the governor a lot of credit. We all just worked very well together.
And it ran pretty smoothly.
Yes, which is most important. I mean, at the end of the day, if the trains aren't running on time, if the process breaks down, I don't care what the policy is, things will fall apart. But the process was smooth. People were treated fairly, whether they were Republicans or Democrats. And I think at the end of the day, that provided an environment to get things done.
So productive session, along with integrity of the process. That was kind of 2 key cornerstones to this.
Yeah, I think so. I believe that no matter who you are, Democrat, Republican, if somebody's got a good idea, it should be able to be vetted, should be willing to be debated, and potentially passed into law. And I felt like we gave a lot of people that opportunity, no matter where they came from or who they were. A lot of good ideas got through. We passed a bill that's got what we call the normalcy bill,
right,
which really helps out a lot of foster kids. So a lot of different policy areas were addressed. And I talked earlier about the work plan that I did with the Senate President. That was a big deal.
Let's talk about Workplan Florida, because the economy is key. You know, ultimately, it's when the economy goes down, not only does everybody hurt, but the people who take it really the worst are the people less fortunate. And so talk a little bit about Workplan Florida. Does that hook up with Governor Scott's plan to get people back to work?
It does. And well, the first initial part of it and a cornerstone of it was education.
Right.
Continuing to try to transform our education system into a 21st century model. We've spent a lot of time talking about K-12. We'll continue to spend a lot of time talking about K-12. Right. We had what I believe to be was a bit of a rudderless ship in our higher education system. There was no direction. There was no sense of understanding of where we were trying to go. Not having a top 25 university, not having a top 10 university. And so we've got to invest in our higher education system. Its resources, its efficiency, its innovation. And that was a big cornerstone of what we did. We also worked really hard to create what we call career and professional education, which is our CAPE. We put $120 million, Ed, into CAPE. And what that means is we're going to be providing incentives for high schools, middle schools, and state colleges to give students the skills that are out there in the 21st century workforce, to get them credits and, frankly, a certification where they can go and prove to the workforce that they're ready for the job.
Talk a little bit about driving jobs and driving industry to Florida, because I think some of what you talked about was cutting taxes on manufacturers. Has that yielded results?
It has. I mean, if you look at where the unemployment rate was just 2.5, 3 years ago, it was almost 12%. Today it's 7%. You look at growth. 1,000 people a day are projected to move to Florida in 2013. That's 360,000 new people. That means jobs, that means growth opportunities, that means houses that are being bought, cars, you name it. The trickle-down effect of having a growth state like Florida is tremendous. And if you look at Florida and where we are, and you compare us to somewhere else like a California or an Illinois, we've rebounded much faster than they have. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And I believe it's because we're treating people's investment better, our taxes are lower, and our quality of life is better for our citizens.
A home run for everybody.
That's it.
Last piece, there was a lot of controversy at the beginning of session around Obamacare and the implementation. There was a little disagreement between the governor's office and in fact, you, who stood up for the House and took a position on expanding Medicaid. Tell us a little bit of the disagreement, and then give us a little background as to what your plan would entail.
Yeah, I think everybody believes that we need to have more people with insurance in our state. We want more people to have coverage. Where the breakdown takes place is who should be providing that coverage. Should government be creating a larger entitlement like Medicaid to put more people on a government-run healthcare system that in a lot of instances is broken? Or should we be finding a private sector solution? Our solution was one that embraced the private sector. It helped people who were disabled. It helped people who were the parents of children who were on Medicaid.
So those most needy
That's exactly right. The most vulnerable in the state.
Most vulnerable.
But the people it didn't help were people who were between the ages of 19 and 64. If you're between 19 and 64 and you're healthy and you can work and you don't have any kids, we don't feel like it's the state's responsibility to pay for health care. And the billions of dollars, Ed, that we would be putting on the state's back that potentially we would have to carry, to me is just a huge risk for Medicaid expansion that we can't even prove solves any problems with health care.
So how do you solve it? Because Republicans, the knock is that we say no.
Yeah.
But we don't offer alternatives, but I think you did.
We did. We offered an alternative that was free market based. It was a voucher based system. It said, if you are one of those vulnerable populations, we're going to give you a voucher with a certain amount of money attached to it. You're going to be able to go to the private sector and buy a private sector healthcare plan that addresses your needs, one that's curtailed to what you need as a citizen, not Medicaid. The problem with Medicaid is it's really hard to get access to care.
Right.
We give people a card, we tell them they're on Medicaid, but the problem is when they go to actually try to see a doctor, it's really hard for them to get in to see anybody because most doctors and providers in Florida don't provide for people on Medicaid.
Right, a little flight from the medical profession away from that.
That's right.
Right. So even if you get to see a doctor, it's for like 2 seconds and he's off to the next patient. So
well, they don't make money. They don't make money
Right.
off of it, and so they focus on private health care because that's where they can actually make a living, and you can't blame them for that. And so the idea is, people have to ask themselves: do they really think expanding Medicaid is going to make Florida healthier? Do they really think creating an entitlement state is going to make us stronger? And I don't think most people or the majority of Floridians believe that. I don't believe that. So I'm not going to govern that way. But we are going to work with the governor and we're going to work with the Senate to try to come up with a plan that is free market based and pushes back on the Obamacare one-size-fits-all solution that I think is going to break this country.
Next year, quickly coming. You're in committees starting next month. Talk about your goals for next session.
Well, again, we're watching the budget really closely. Right now it shows that we have a little bit of a surplus, which is nice to have some breathing room. The governor and I and the Senate president are committed to cutting taxes. I think you'll see a significant tax cut come out of the House and Senate next year. The governor posted a challenge out the other day, said he wanted $500 million in tax cuts. I like the way that he's thinking. And so I hope we can get to that number. Well, time we'll see. We'll tell if we can. But I also think you'll see a return back to education. There's a big debate about standards, grading, Common Core.
Right.
We're going to have to iron those things out. We have got to determine the direction of Florida with K-12. I think right now the ground is a little bit shaken as to where we're going as a state when it comes to K-12 education. I want to make sure we bring some clarity to that. So those two things will be big.
I know there's going to be a debate. I think somebody already filed a bill talking about Common Core or rejecting Common Core. How do you deal with establishing quality standards so that higher education institutions want our K-12 graduates without some of that?
Well, I think there are some people that are concerned that they think the federal government has hijacked the Common Core. The truth is there's a lot of misperceptions that are out there on Common Core, but there are some legitimate concerns from people who don't want a national curriculum. I don't want a national curriculum either.
Right.
There are people who don't want a national database with our students' information. I don't want that either. So we're working with the governor and the Senate to come up with a plan that can address some of those concerns, but also make sure that we have a high bar for our students.
Put aside the standards and the hot button of Common Core. What other things can the legislature do to address, additional parental choice and making sure that the graduates are college ready and making sure that the colleges are also ready to accept them? Because, getting into the University of Florida these days is a tough chore.
It is tough. I think we have to embrace a few things. We have to embrace choice. We have to continue to empower our charter schools. We have to continue to empower our choice programs and our vouchers that we have that are out there. Today, we have 55,000 students who come from a low-income household that have a choice to go to a private school that offers their child a different education. That's a wonderful thing. We didn't have that 10 years ago. So that's a great thing. It's going to be 100,000, I think, in the next 4 or 5 years. A tremendous opportunity. Charter schools are growing like crazy, providing parents with choice. But we also have to embrace technology. We have to recognize that students have the ability now to get a student-centered education, where the education is focused on them as an individual, not necessarily as a classroom. And that's something we could never do before. And if we can embrace that right and harness it, I think it's going to put Florida way ahead of everybody else.
Last question. We're about to head into political season, particularly in either re-electing the governor or somebody else. Somebody else maybe we've known before. Mm-hmm. Why should Governor Scott be re-elected?
Well, I think he's got the best record. If you look at the Governor Scott's record, unemployment is down, graduation rates are up, we put more money into education, we're having budget surpluses and not budget deficits. He's got our house in order. Governor Scott's not a flashy guy. He's not a flashy governor. But what he is a results governor. And everything he said he was going to do, he's done. And to me, that's how we should be judging our political leaders, not based off of flash, not based off of what people say, based on what they do. And I think if you look at the governor's record, he clearly deserves to be reelected, and I think he will be.
On that note, we're going to end. And Will, Speaker, I want to thank you very much for spending the time with us today. And thank you again. That concludes our webcast today with Speaker of the Florida House, Will Weatherford. We look forward to your comments. Thank you.